Hi, you're very welcome to another episode in our update series. Today we're joined by a very good friend of mine, Jon Carr, and Jon is Vice President of Research and the Environment at the Atlantic Salmon Federation in St. Andrews, Canada. Jon is with us today to describe some very interesting adult tracking work that he's doing along the southwest coast of Greenland. Now, this has some similarities to the tracking work we're doing here in Scotland, but it certainly has some very new and innovative features to it that I'm very keen to discuss with Jon. And of course, Byron is with us again today to chat with Jon about ASF's research work, and I'll join in where appropriate. Byron, can I turn the conversation over to you then and ask you to get us started?
Yeah, absolutely. Jon, Ken, great to have a chance to speak to you both today. Jon, I want to dig into this fascinating research that you're doing with this tracking project. But before we get into that, just tell me a little bit about your background and what your day-to-day looks like.
Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Research and Environment at the Atlantic Salmon Federation. We're located in North America, and our headquarters is in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, Canada. And we're a nonprofit international organization. We have offices, satellite offices situated throughout Atlantic Canada and also in the state of Maine. And our primary client is the Atlantic salmon and the environment on which it depends. So we're really all about Atlantic salmon. What can we do to conserve, restore, and protect the species? So within our department, we're involved with a lot of different research programs, but one of the primary projects that I'd like to talk to you about today is our telemetry work.
Great. So this is the telemetry work that you're doing with Atlantic salmon off the coast of Greenland. Am I correct?
Yeah. So what we've been doing is we've been tagging fish in multiple rivers in North America since around 2003, following them through freshwater, and we put these receiver gates where the head of tide meets the estuary or bay, so that we can get a measure of survival through freshwater. And then we also put receiver gates in the outer bays of these systems to get a measure of survival through the bay and estuarine area. And then we're also tracking them out to sea as far as possible. So we have strategic gates out in the open ocean, Gulf of St. Lawrence, and now Labrador Sea. So we've been able to track fish up to 1,000 kilometers from their point of exit from the river systems. What ideally we would like to do is track a smolt from the time it leaves the river to the time it comes back as an adult. So because of the challenges with technology at the current time, we are unable to track a fish through the entire migration. So what we're looking at is partitioning survival at different phases of the migration. So right now, just to give you a quick summary, is we've been able to start identifying where these fish are going as they leave the river systems, as they go out in the interstitial coastal zones. And the Atlantic Salmon Trust have started the program very similar to this in their partners over the last couple of years or so. But once these fish get out into the open ocean, Labrador Sea, these tags expire, so we're unable to track them any further. So our next question is, how can we actually find out more of what's going on in the ocean? And one of the things that we're starting to look at now is that last phase of migration. And that last phase of migration occurs off the west coast of Greenland for the North American stocks. These are two sea winter salmon, the salmon that spend at least 2 years in the ocean feeding. That's where they migrate, and a lot of feeding occurs over there. So what we've been doing is partitioning survival. So we've looked at the first few months of at sea migration. There's a bit of a gap in between, but what we're doing now is we're jumping over that gap and looking at the last few months in the ocean when the fish are much larger. And how we're doing that is we're using a new tag called a satellite pop-off tag. Okay. So that's what we're doing in West Greenland, and I'll just leave it at that for now.
I think for context, most people will have heard of Greenland, but I would bet few people have taken the time to actually look at it on a map, because it's a massive landmass. Just explain the scale of it and where it's situated on the planet.
Yeah, so Greenland is a massive landmass, and it's northeast of Labrador, off of North America. And I guess you would call it west or slightly northwest of Iceland. Okay.
Yeah.
And so massive landmass, and it is presents many challenges on how you get there even. So coming from North America it's probably much more of a challenge than it is from United Kingdom, Scotland area. And once you're over in Greenland, each town has most towns do have transportation of vehicles, but once you leave a town, that's where your roads end. So really, the primary mode of transportation, like in North America, we use cars and trucks. In Greenland, they mainly use boats to go from community to community. So to travel around Greenland, you're either on small planes, helicopters, or boats for the most part, and that's just how it works over there.
So this project to tag adult salmon off the coast of Greenland, explain that process to me, because they're swimming free in the ocean and feeding and doing what salmon do before they head back to where they were born. How on earth did you go about capturing these fish in the first place? And then tell me also a little bit about that tag, because you held it up in your hand a moment ago, and look, it's quite a chunky thing.
Yeah, so we really want to look at that last phase of migration. So we chose West Greenland because that's where a lot of our larger fish, the fish that spend at least 2 or 3 years feeding the ocean, coming back as large salmon, usually greater than 63 centimeters in length. And typically there's been a lot of work throughout Greenland, research work going on. And we've got pretty good knowledge that the stocks on West Greenland primarily consist of North American fish, but through the genetic analysis, we're finding that generally speaking, there's about 60% North American and 40% or so could be European fish, primarily Scotland and UK and around there, and it varies from year to year. So that's why we decided to go there. So we wanted to find out the marine distribution and migration routes for this last phase of migration, because we know that's where a lot of the fish are feeding. We also wanted to look at the stock-specific migration routes, because multiple stocks from North America and again from UK and Scotland are over there. We want to better understand their migration routes, behavior, mortality during that time in the ocean. And as we build the tracks of these fish, so basically we want to build on where these fish are going, where they're moving. Then we want to link all this information over a period of time, because we're going to be tagging these fish multiple years, probably 4 to 5 years. We want to pull all those migratory trajectories together and start linking that information back to the oceanographic features. What are the ocean currents? What are the temperatures? What are the prey species that the fish would be feeding on? What are the predators out there? And try and put all these pieces of the puzzle together to try and understand what is happening, okay? So we've chosen this satellite pop-off tag because it's much different than what you would have for your acoustic tags. These here tags actually record daily water temperature, pressure as well, so you can get depths, sunrise and sunset time, so that you can get geopositioning data. So essentially, this tag archives where the fish is on a daily basis, okay? And how it works is that you put this on the back of a salmon, and you pre-program the tag to pop off at a set date. There's a release mechanism that burns off the fish. So after so many months, like we're taking these fish in Greenland, September and October, we have these tags programmed to come off early May, because that's when these fish would be coming back to North American rivers. So when the tag programs to come off, it releases from the fish, goes to the surface of the water, and then it starts talking to the satellites. The data is transmitted to the satellites right into your office of where you collect your information. Now, if the fish happens to die, because we know there's quite a high mortality occurring in the ocean, if the fish dies before the pre-program pop-off time, there's another mechanism that'll tell us that this fish is no longer moving or something's happened to this fish. So that's when it will go to the surface and start recording the information as well. So the interesting thing from these tags is we have tagged a number of kelts in North American rivers leading up to this program. And kelts, I think most people know what kelts are, but these are the salmon that come back to the fresh water. They spawn, and then they're known as kelts or post-spawn salmon. They usually overwinter under the ice in North American rivers and go back out into the ocean to recondition and build their energy reserves, and then come back and spawn again. So from the tagging of these kelts, we've actually been able to identify where the fish are going on a daily basis. We've actually recorded tracks of depths of up to 900 meters that these fish are diving. Wow. And we've also been able to link predation events to these fish too, because the water temperature and water depth that's recorded, if this salmon is consumed by a large predator, then the internal temperature of that predator and understanding the movements of the predator, you can actually link back and say, okay, this salmon was eaten by such and such a predator. So we've been able to link from our kelt tracking predation events from tuna, porbeagle sharks, even sperm whales. Some Norwegian colleagues have identified sperm whales. So there's a number of animals that we've been able to identify as predators of Atlantic salmon. So that gives you a little bit of context of how these tags work. So it's quite exciting of what information you can get from these tags. The information is priceless as far as I'm concerned in terms of what you can garner from these tags.
How do they, I was going to ask you, how do they affect salmon actually being attached to them? But maybe before we get into how the actual process of you attaching it to salmon, maybe we could move on to the actual operation at hand to catch salmon in the first place, to put these tags on them.
Yes. So when we first went to Greenland, 2017 was the first year we went to Greenland. Really, it was a reconnaissance mission of where should we do our research, and also introducing and starting to introduce ourselves to people in different communities and find folks that can help us over there. So we did that in 2017, and then when we came back, we decided an approach for 2018. So the first year that we went over to actually tag the fish, we were looking at various methodologies to try and capture the fish. We used pike nets that are modified that you could use in the ocean. We used other type of nets called trap nets. They're like box nets that you can catch cod with. We even tried gill nets. But one of the primary methods that we wanted to use was called trolling. And I'll explain trolling in a minute, because that's what we're using now. 2018, when we tried all those methods, we found that the trolling was the best way of catching the fish, most efficient, and least harm to the salmon. So that's how we're moving forward with trolling. And with the trolling, what that involves is you've got a boat, and you use what we call down rig equipment. And this down rig equipment helps us. We use fishing rods as well that are connected to the down rig equipment, which in turn really allows us to put our fishing lines at certain depths behind the boat and just release our lines behind the boat and just drive the boat very slowly. And that's basically the concept of trolling. And we use lures, spoons, and sometimes flashers, and we just basically drive the boat very slowly and just have about 4 to 6 rods fishing at a time, and that's how we catch your salmon.
So there's maybe a little bit of an enjoyment. If you're into fishing, there's a little bit of enjoyment involved in this research as well, potentially. So you hook up the salmon, and then you bring them into the side of the boat. And what's the next phase of the operation?
Yeah, so we hook up the salmon, bring it into the side of the boat. So when we catch I was going to do the motion here, but when we catch a fish, we reel it in, because that's where, like you say, you can get excited pretty fast about catching your salmon. We bring the salmon in the boat. And then we remove the hook, and often the hooks come off quite easy. We catch probably about 50% of more than that. But when we bring the fish in, we release it when we have this large holding tank that they put the fish in. And then what we do is we actually put the fish to sleep, a mild anesthesia, and that allows the fish to stay calm while we attach the tag to the back of the fish. And we also record. We take length, a weight of the fish. We take a scale sample so we can look at the age of the fish. And we take a very small piece of fin tissue, about the size of half the size of your pinky fingernail. From that fin tissue, that's where you do your genetic analysis. We have a lab that runs the analysis so that we could actually identify where these fish are coming from. The first part is continent of origin. So is it from North America or is it from Europe? And then we can actually even get into finer scale of possibly region of origin, like what part of North America it came from, what part of Europe. And in some cases, you might be able to get down to a specific river as to where these fish came from, because that's important. Because once the fish is tagged and you look at the tracks from that animal later on, to have the context of where this fish originated from really helps to know where these fish are distributed in the ocean.
Ken, this is tying in very nicely to the genetic sampling that we've talked about before. I can see a lot of very relevant information now, where you're looking at fish off the coast of Greenland, and now because of the work that has been done in river here in Scotland, you might be able to work out that these fish have come from a specific river because of the genetic sampling and research that's been done.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, because certainly us biologists, we really are magpies. And everything we collect, we tend to keep. And because of that, there is the most incredible database of material from Greenland. So from the time the first surveys were done by biologists in Greenland in the 80s and 90s, every year there has been a program run by ICES, the International Council for the Exploration of the Seas, and its partners. And that program then has sent over samplers. And the samplers have actually collected biological material that has been analysed, and AST was involved about 5 or 6 years ago in funding the first analysis of the European fish. So not alone do we have the up-to-date information from Jon, but we can actually look back in time then and see not alone where the fish came from and where they're heading for, but we can also see how the relative numbers have changed over time in terms of the relative proportions. So it's all, as you say, beginning to make sense and beginning to come together. And thankfully, through the Likely Suspects framework and through programs like that, we're working now much more together than we ever did before to crack this and to try and get a real idea of the migration and distribution throughout the full lives of these fish at sea.
Jon, so with the research that you've done already and the information that you've got back in the first couple of years of this program, what do you know? What have you learned? And what are you able to already see actions that can be put in place to mitigate loss at sea? How much wiser are we for the research that you've done?
Yeah, so this is really the beginning phase because 2018 we tagged, it was more or less proof of concept in 2018 of how can we catch these animals, what's the most efficient and effective way of catching these animals. So we put 12 of the pop-off tags on in 2018. 2019, we really honed our efforts onto trolling, and we managed to take 20 fish. What we tried in 2019 is we thought, let's try a different community further north. The community where we're situated right now is southern part of Greenland, west coast obviously, in a community called Qaqatok, and hopefully I'm pronouncing it properly. And that's where we're really basing our research efforts, because we're working closely with a recreational user who goes out and trolls just for the fun of it. So we've been able to utilize that person based on their knowledge of where these fish are and where and when to do it. And last year, 2019, we tried another community further north, call it Sissimut, and we were skunked. We didn't have any luck there. So what we decided to do is really focus all of our efforts in Qaqatok moving forward, because we've solidified our communications with the local community. We've made more partnerships down in that local area. So what we're intending on doing moving forward, and again, we're probably going to be doing at least another 3 years. We're going to be focusing our efforts in Qaqatok, but having more boats instead of just the one vessel. We're going to increase our catch per unit effort, hopefully per day, by utilizing more boats. And we'll go back to Ken in a few moments, and because Ken's going to be playing a role with us this year too, with the Atlantic Salmon Trust. So we'll talk about another thing that we're going to be trying as well. Also, lessons learned from 2018 and 19. We're starting to look at the data that we have collected out of the 12 fish tagged in 2018, 20, and 2019. Where and when were we catching these fish? Was it on a certain tide? Was it in what depths were these fish caught at? Things like that, just to try and focus in more on where we really should be trying to catch these fish. And just before I go any further, I want to acknowledge our partnerships too, because this involves very many partners, and really it's key to have partnerships. The more people working together, the better things are going to work moving forward. So one of our key partners in North America is NOAA. It's the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration in the U.S. We're also working closely with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, DFO, in Canada. And in Greenland, we're working closely with KNEPK, and that's the Hunter and Fisher Association. Those are folks on the ground helping us a great deal with the program there. We're also working closely with the Marine Institute in Nuuk, and also the Greenland government. Now, besides that, some of our major funders have been Atlantic Salmon Research Joint Venture in Canada, and the Atlantic Salmon Trust have also helped fund this program, and and as Ken is going to talk about in a few minutes, becoming more of a partner on this program too, especially because of the number of European fish we have there. It's really a win-win for both ASF and the AST working closely together. And I don't want to forget about one other partner in Norway, University of Tromsø. We have somebody working there with us very closely who's worked with ASF in the past, and this person, Jon Carr, he's got a great deal of knowledge in terms of trying to figure out what these tracks mean and finesse the tracks so that we're really confident as to where these fish actually are in the ocean.
Ken, as a way to bring this fascinating conversation to a close, just explain this kind of strengthening of partnership with the Atlantic Salmon Trust and the work that's going on in Greenland.
Okay, well, this is certainly a first for me. And certainly if we think about people who are really interested in ferox trout in Scotland, and people who are experts in terms of trolling for ferox and trolling for very large pike. So we have quite a lot of expertise of that in relation to these very large fish in freshwater, both in Europe and particularly in Scotland. So what we're hoping to do is to actually bring across some of that experience, some of the techniques and some of the technology that we use in terms of the different sonar equipment and so on we use for identifying the actual feeding zones. And as John was mentioning earlier, if you can actually pinpoint the layers within which the fish are feeding on any particular day, you will greatly increase your catches. So we're hoping to work very closely together on this particular project. I've worked in Cockatock before, and I hope, COVID-19 permitting, to join John there and see can we actually up the ante in terms of increasing the number of fish that we can actually get to tag. And I think that would be a great result if we can do that.
So our results from 2018, we put 12 pop-ups on fish, and we actually tagged 14 fish because we had a couple acoustic tags as well. But out of the fish we tagged in 2018, it was actually a 50-50 mix of North American and European fish, and those European fish from Scotland, UK region. And so from those tracks, we actually heard from 8 fish out of the 12, and 5 of them, I believe, were from Europe. So we actually have the preliminary tracks available for those fish. Your viewers might be able to see this of where these fish had gone. And for the North American fish, we had a really good representation from different regions of North America, from Ungava Bay, Labrador Sea, the Gas Bay region, and we even had one fish from the state of Maine, where the stocks are nearly 0. So very encouraging information in terms of the stock specific information. Now in 2019, the 20 fish we tagged, it was more of a 70% North American to 30% European mix. So as I mentioned, there's going to be some flux from year to year, and right now we do have information back from the 2019 fish. Out of the 20 fish tagged, I think we've heard from 10 of them, and so there is a mix of European and North American from there. So again, what we want to do is build that information up year on, year out for the next 3 to 4 years and get as much information as available together so that we can start deciphering where these fish are and can we do anything about it at the end of the day as to where they are dying and as they make their journey home.
Amazing. I'll have to send in my ferox fishing CV to you so I can tag along. Brilliant. Well, I think I could talk for another hour on this, and I'd love to do that at a future date, but I think that's the last of the questions from me to both of you.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, John, and thank you, Byron, for what was really a fascinating insight into this work off Greenland. And we hope you enjoyed today's episode. And as usual, if you have any questions or queries for myself or indeed for John, please do leave them in the comments box. And don't forget, we'll be broadcasting another episode of this series very soon.